What does it mean to be caught in the rat race? It's a phrase we hear constantly, tossed around with a knowing smirk, used to describe the everyday hustle of modern life. But when we look beyond the surface, the rat race is not just about long hours, bills, and burnt-out ambition. It is something far more insidious, a psychological and philosophical trap that shapes not only how we live, but what we think we are. To escape it, or even begin to recognize it, we must understand it from the ground up. Not just economically or socially, but existentially. The rat race is not merely a structure of labor, it is a way of seeing the world that consumes us from within. The rat race is rooted in a simple yet devastating illusion that our value as human beings is conditional. Conditional on achievement. Conditional on money. Conditional on reputation, appearance, productivity, comparison. It is a worldview that trains us to chase something, a future ideal of success or security, while ignoring the immense weight and presence of the present moment. It is not a treadmill by accident. You run harder and harder, yet you remain in place. The finish line keeps moving because it was never really there. It only exists in the mind of the participant, in the idea that life is a project to be perfected, a ladder to be climbed. What no one tells you is that the ladder leans against nothing. Philosophically, this problem is ancient. The Stoics saw it in the Roman Empire. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, observed that the vast majority of people are preoccupied while doing nothing, rushing through life with busyness that conceals a lack of purpose. He warned against becoming a slave to fortune, not just in terms of wealth, but in terms of reputation, outcomes, and other people's approval. To the Stoics, freedom was not found in climbing higher, but in stepping back. To be free is not to win the race, but to no longer need to run it. Marcus Aurelius echoed this, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do. Only what you do. This shift, from external validation to internal alignment, is at the heart of escaping the rat race. And yet, modern society has doubled down on the very values the Stoics warned against. We live in an age of hypervisibility. Social media, advertising, workplace metrics, and even personal branding have turned life into a performance. From a young age, we are conditioned to compare ourselves to others, to measure success through quantifiable metrics, followers, salaries, promotions, likes. The result is not just burnout. It is existential emptiness. People reach the top and feel nothing. They win awards, earn the income, get the title, and quietly suffer under the weight of unfulfilled expectations. This is the rat race's final cruelty, not just that it keeps you running, but that it convinces you it's your only option. The French philosopher Albert Camus wrote about the absurdity of life, the disconnect between our hunger for meaning and the cold indifference of the universe. In the myth of Sisyphus, he imagines the Greek figure condemned to roll a boulder uphill, only for it to fall back down again. Forever. Camus doesn't suggest Sisyphus escapes his fate, but he reframes it: one must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because the awareness of absurdity allows us to rebel, to choose our attitude, to embrace the struggle on our own terms. This is key. The rat race only owns us when we forget we have a choice. When we forget that we can redefine the game altogether. But psychological captivity runs deep. The brain becomes conditioned by repetition. In cognitive psychology, there is something known as cognitive fusion, where we mistake our thoughts for reality. If we think I must succeed to be worthy, or I'm falling behind, we assume those are objective truths rather than mental events. Over time, these beliefs become so internalized that we act them out automatically, without even seeing them. That's why escaping the rat race isn't just about changing your job or moving off the grid. It is about changing the relationship you have with your own mind. Mindfulness techniques, particularly those rooted in Buddhist traditions, offer a sharp contrast to the rat race mentality. In the Tao Te Ching, Laozi writes, "Chase after money and security, and your heart will never unclench." Taoism advocates for Wu Wei, effortless action, being in flow with life rather than striving against it. The more you grasp, the more things slip away. Zen koans take this further, often using paradox to destabilize logical thinking and provoke insight. One classic koan asks, "What is your original face before you were born?" Questions like these do not have rational answers. They are designed to short-circuit conceptual thinking and awaken deeper forms of knowing. The rat race cannot survive in the presence of radical stillness. And yet, society does not reward stillness. It penalizes it. We are encouraged to be always optimizing our productivity, our appearance, even our relationships. The culture of hustle isn't just a work ethic, it's a worldview. It reduces life to a series of achievements, turning rest into laziness and introspection into indulgence. Critical theorists like Theodore Adorno saw this in the mid-20th century. In the culture industry, he argued that mass entertainment pacifies the population, creating the illusion of satisfaction while reinforcing conformity. Even leisure becomes a product, a way to recharge just enough to keep producing. You aren't living, you're consuming an idea of life. In psychological terms, this creates learned helplessness. When people feel they must comply with a system they didn't choose, they begin to suppress their own agency. Even when alternatives appear, they are ignored. The cage is no longer physical, it is mental. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, understood this well. In Man's Search for Meaning, he argued that suffering is bearable when it has purpose. But meaning cannot be imposed externally. It must be discovered individually, through personal values and chosen commitments. To live a meaningful life is to stop outsourcing your worth. But how do we even begin to define our worth without the metrics we've been trained to chase? This is where existential philosophy offers guidance. Thinkers like Sartre and Kierkegaard insisted that meaning is not found, it is created. Sartre wrote, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." That is both liberating and terrifying. It means we are free, but also responsible. No one is coming to save us. There is no script. The rat race is seductive because it offers a script. It tells you what to do, what to want, and what success looks like. It offers a false sense of certainty in exchange for your authenticity. But the path out is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's not just quitting your job or moving to a cabin in the woods. It is a profound process of deconstruction. It is asking, over and over again, who am I without the chase? This question has no final answer. It is a lifelong inquiry. In Eastern traditions, the ego, the constructed self-image, is seen as the source of suffering. When we believe we are what we do, or what we have, we become trapped in cycles of craving and fear. Buddhism speaks of dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness of life. And it teaches that liberation comes not through more, but through less. Letting go. Seeing clearly. Ironically, the more we let go of control, the more freedom we gain. This is echoed in modern psychological research, especially around acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. ACT encourages people to stop struggling against their thoughts and feelings, and instead align their actions with their deepest values. You don't have to feel confident to live courageously. You don't need to eliminate anxiety to do meaningful work. The rat race teaches us that life must feel a certain way to be valid. But that's a lie. The most meaningful lives are often lived in quiet defiance of comfort. One of the greatest lies of the rat race is that we are alone in it. That if we stop running, we will be left behind. But the truth is, many are secretly yearning to slow down, to breathe, to feel something real. When you step off the treadmill, you will not be alone. You will find others who are tired of running, who want to build a life not around accumulation, but around presence. Not around status, but around soul. And that is where we will leave this first section, not with answers, but with a different kind of question. Not how do I win the race? But what would life look like if I didn't need to run? That question does not belong to systems. It belongs to you. In Section 1, we looked at the philosophical roots and psychological grip of the rat race. We saw how it isn't just a job or an economic condition, but a state of mind, an internalized system of beliefs, fears, and illusions. To escape the rat race is not simply to quit a job or buy freedom with wealth. That's only scratching the surface. The deeper, more lasting escape must take place inside. It is an existential and psychological journey. To unwind the mental habits that bind us, to unlearn the cultural programming that taught us to equate being with doing, and to reclaim the one thing the rat race cannot survive, authentic presence. This section is about how. Not just intellectually, but practically and inwardly. How can we begin to loosen the grip of the rat race on our minds, bodies, and spirits? We'll explore the most powerful philosophical and psychological tools for this transformation. Tools that challenge illusions. Tools that reveal truth. Tools that shift attention away from the grind and toward a life of depth, clarity, and purpose. Let's begin with perhaps the most underappreciated tool, attention. Wherever our attention goes, our energy follows. The rat race thrives not because of external pressure alone, but because of where we habitually place our attention. We're trained to scan for what we lack, to compare ourselves against others, to fixate on future outcomes and fears. Attention becomes a sort of internal currency, and we keep spending it on stories that deplete us. To reverse this trend, we must reclaim our attention and learn how to direct it intentionally. Mindfulness is the practice of exactly that. It sounds simple, noticing your breath, watching your thoughts, but it is revolutionary in what it reveals. Through mindfulness, we learn that thoughts are not facts. Emotions are not permanent. Cravings and fears are like waves, powerful, but temporary. The rat race keeps us identified with every impulse. I need this. I must do that. Mindfulness breaks the illusion of identification. You are not the thought. You are the observer. This single insight can begin to unravel years of conditioning. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, a program developed by John Kabat-Zinn, has helped thousands of people escape compulsive thought loops and regain peace of mind. Neuroscientific research confirms what ancient sages knew. Sustained mindfulness practice changes the brain. It increases the thickness of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain associated with awareness, compassion, and conscious decision-making. It also shrinks the amygdala, which governs fear and reactive behavior. In other words, mindfulness gives you the neurological foundation to step out of the rat race's fight-or-flight mode. But mindfulness alone isn't always enough. We also need tools that cut deeper into the narrative structures that shape our lives. This is where Socratic questioning comes in, a powerful, rational method of self-inquiry. Popularized by Socrates and modernized in cognitive therapy, this technique invites us to interrogate our assumptions. If you believe, for example, if I don't succeed, I'll be a failure, Socratic questioning asks, is that true? What does success even mean? According to whom? What evidence supports that belief? What evidence contradicts it? This process is not about arriving at a tidy conclusion. It's about disrupting certainty, the kind of certainty that keeps you trapped in unexamined pursuits. The power of philosophy is not in giving answers, but in sharpening questions. Questions that puncture illusions. Questions that turn inward, forcing us to look not at the world, but at our place in it. One of the greatest illusions of the rat race is that the future matters more than the present. We live as if life is a rehearsal, as if joy, presence, and fulfillment can only happen once certain conditions are met. But those conditions are always just out of reach. The job, the relationship, the number in the bank. Even when achieved, the mind quickly resets the goalposts. That is the trap. It isn't just psychological, it's philosophical. It assumes that being is less important than becoming. That existence itself must be earned. This is where existentialism offers a powerful counterpoint. Thinkers like Martin Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre emphasized the primacy of experience. Heidegger in particular warned of inauthenticity, a mode of living in which one follows the they of society rather than one's own truth. He described how most people fall into a state of das Man, the they self, where we live not as ourselves, but as everyone else does. They'd say to go to college. They'd say to get a stable job. They'd say to buy a house. We comply, and often lose ourselves in the process. Authenticity, in this framework, is not found in rebellion for its own sake. It is found in confronting your freedom. Realizing you are the author of your life, even when, especially when, the options seem limited. This is not always comforting. Freedom can be terrifying. But it is also the only path out of the rat race that leads to meaning rather than just escape. Viktor Frankl built on these ideas in his own way. In Man's Search for Meaning, he observed that human beings can endure almost any suffering if they see meaning in it. The rat race, by contrast, offers endless activity without meaning. People feel anxious not just because they're busy, but because they're busy with things that feel empty. Frankl taught that meaning is found in three ways: through work, through love, and through suffering. But always, meaning is something chosen, not inherited. To escape the rat race, we must stop waiting for meaning to be handed to us. We must create it. That creative process requires what Carl Jung would call integration. Jung believed that we are not just conscious beings, we also have an unconscious mind filled with parts of ourselves we repress or deny. The rat race often thrives on disconnection. We suppress our creative side to be productive. We deny our fears to appear confident. We hide our doubts to fit in. Jung called these repressed elements the shadow, and he argued that wholeness comes not from perfection, but from embracing the totality of the self, light and dark, known and unknown. Shadow work is a psychological practice of facing what we've pushed away. This can take the form of journaling, dream analysis, or working with projections, noticing when we overreact to others and asking, what is this really about in me? When you begin to integrate the shadow, something profound happens. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop chasing approval. You no longer need the rat race to validate your worth, because you've begun to recover what you had denied, your full self. Alongside shadow work is the practice of values clarification. This is simple but powerful. The rat race keeps us fixated on external goals. But goals are empty unless they're aligned with your true values. A value is not a destination. It is a direction. For example, compassion is a value. You never reach it, but you can live toward it. When you identify your values, your choices become clearer. You stop asking, what should I do to get ahead, and instead ask, what action is aligned with who I want to be? One exercise used in acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, is the values card sort. You look at a large list of values: honesty, creativity, autonomy, security, adventure, and so on, and sort them by importance. This forces you to make choices, to prioritize. And once you know your top values, you begin designing your life around them. This practice, though deceptively simple, is the foundation of a meaningful life. Another psychological tool worth integrating is paradoxical intention. Developed by Frankl, this technique involves intentionally exaggerating the very behavior or fear you're trying to eliminate. For example, someone with performance anxiety might walk on stage and say, "Watch how nervous I am." This flips the script. It removes the fear's power by owning it. The rat race tells us to hide our flaws, to polish our image. Paradoxical intention teaches us the opposite, to disarm fear through radical honesty. And now we come to what may be the most important and most difficult technique of all: letting go. Letting go is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is the conscious act of releasing control over outcomes. In Stoicism, this is called dichotomy of control, the division between what is up to us and what is not. Our actions, choices, and values are within our control. But the outcomes, other people's responses, external rewards, even results, are not. When we live from the first category and release the second, we find a freedom that cannot be taken away. Letting go is also central to Taoism, which views forceful striving as a source of suffering. The Tao Te Ching teaches that the way of life is like water, soft, yielding, but immensely powerful. Laozi writes, "When nothing is done, nothing is left undone." This is Wu Wei, effortless action. It doesn't mean apathy. It means allowing life to unfold without clinging. The rat race is built on clinging to ambition, identity, image, outcome. Letting go is the antidote. It is not a technique to master. It is a state to remember. At this point, the path out of the rat race should be taking shape, not as a single exit, but as a shift in being. Escape doesn't mean retreat. It means transformation. From compulsion to choice. From conformity to authenticity. From fear to alignment. And yet, this is not a solo journey. True liberation often involves community. There is a myth in Western culture of the lone wolf, the self-made, hyper-independent individual. But this is another illusion of the rat race. It isolates us, makes us compete instead of collaborate. The reality is that connection, true connection, based on shared values and vulnerability, is one of the deepest sources of meaning available to us. In the next section, we'll explore how to build a life beyond the race, a sustainable philosophy of being that is not only free from the rat race, but rich with presence, depth, and contribution. But before we go there, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, which part of me is still running? And which part of me is ready, deeply ready, to stop? We've explored the illusion of the rat race. We've examined its psychological architecture and philosophical roots. We've begun to unravel its grip using powerful tools of awareness, inquiry, and detachment. But what comes after the escape? What happens when we stop running? Is life outside the race even sustainable, or is it merely a fantasy in a world that won't stop moving? This final section is about rebuilding. It's about constructing a life that doesn't just reject the rat race, but replaces it with something deeper. Something honest. Something rooted in what the philosopher Alan Watts once called the wisdom of insecurity, a life not built on control or accumulation, but on presence, alignment, and integration. The rat race thrives on fear and fragmentation. Life beyond the race begins with coherence. A harmony between what you think, feel, say, and do. And that harmony, while rare in modern life, is not only possible, it is the beginning of true freedom. We begin with perhaps the most countercultural principle of all, doing less. In a culture that celebrates more productivity, more efficiency, more hustle, doing less sounds like failure. But it's not. Doing less is not laziness. It is discernment. It is the ability to know what matters and release what doesn't. When you step away from the race, the first thing you notice is how loud everything is. The to-do lists, the expectations, the noise of always needing to move forward. To rebuild your life, you must first slow down enough to hear yourself again. This is not a metaphor. Slowness is a spiritual practice. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen master, taught that every step can be a miracle. Walk as if you are kissing the earth with your feet. This isn't poetic fluff, it's profound reorientation. Slowness rewires the nervous system. It breaks the compulsion to multitask. It brings you back into relationship with the body, with breath, with the unrepeatable moment of now. A life built on slowness is not empty, it is full in a way frantic life never can be. But slowness alone is not enough. We must rebuild purpose from the ground up. The rat race gives you prepackaged goals: get the job, buy the house, retire early. What replaces those? How do you create a compass that actually points somewhere real? The answer lies in what Viktor Frankl called self-transcendence, the act of aiming at something beyond the self. Not ego, not image, but service, creation, love, contribution. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be as simple as tending a garden, teaching a child, or making something with your hands. Purpose is not scale. Purpose is alignment. And this purpose must be integrated. Not something you do occasionally, but something you live into moment by moment. This is where philosophy becomes practical, not as theory, but as a guide for embodiment. Let's look at Stoicism again. Epictetus taught that we should never tie our peace to things outside our control. He said, happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle: some things are within our control, and some things are not. This is not an abstraction, it is a practice. Each day, you ask, am I living from what I can control? Or am I outsourcing my peace to something I can't? To live from what is within your control is to reclaim agency. And that agency must be anchored in values, not just abstract ideals, but embodied commitments. This is where many people go wrong after leaving the race. They escape the system, but don't replace it with anything. They fall into nihilism or drift. The antidote is intentionality. Sit down. Write your values. Not what sounds good, but what feels true. Honesty? Presence? Curiosity? Simplicity? Choose them. Live them. Design your days around them. Let them shape your routines, your relationships, your responses. Ritual is one of the most powerful ways to do this. Not in a religious sense, but in the sense of rhythm and sacredness. The rat race runs on chaos: wake up late, rush through breakfast, reply to emails, chase the next dopamine hit. Life beyond the race requires structure. Morning rituals, evening reflections, moments of silence. Meditation. Walking. Reading. Journaling. These aren't luxuries, they are the architecture of a sane life. Without ritual, life becomes reactive again. But with ritual, you anchor yourself to something timeless. Another foundational shift is learning to see your life not as a linear progression, but as a cycle. The rat race treats life as a ladder, always up, never down. But nature doesn't move like that. It breathes. It pulses. There are seasons: growth, harvest, decay, rest. If your life is always in growth mode, you're not living, you're burning out. Integration means honoring cycles. Creating space for rest without guilt. Allowing stillness to be productive. Understanding that fallow seasons are not failures, they are necessary for renewal. Rest itself must be redefined. In the rat race, rest is earned, something you get as a reward for exhaustion. In reality, rest is essential. It's when the nervous system resets, when creativity returns, when the deeper layers of the psyche begin to speak. True rest is not scrolling or escaping, it is presence without pressure. Watching clouds. Sitting in the sun. Listening to music without multitasking. Letting the mind wander without grabbing it by the leash. At this stage, many people ask, but what about money? What about responsibility? What about the real world? These are valid questions. Escaping the rat race is not about rejecting material reality, it's about no longer being dominated by it. Money is not the enemy. The desire for stability is not the enemy. The enemy is enslavement, when we no longer own our time, our choices, our attention. You can work a job and still be free. You can live in society and still be awake. The key is conscious participation. Not drifting. Not reacting. Choosing. Minimalism can be a helpful frame here, and not as aesthetic, but as philosophy. The minimalist asks, what do I actually need? What adds value? What clutters my mind and space? Removing excess is not about austerity, it's about making room. Room for clarity. room for joy, room for peace. Every object, every obligation, every habit, is it aligned or not? That's the guiding question. There's also a powerful psychological shift in embracing enough. The rat race is fueled by a sense of deficiency. Not smart enough. Not rich enough. Not fast enough. It never ends. But when you learn to say, "This is enough," everything changes. Contentment is not stagnation. It is spaciousness. It is the recognition that life is not a problem to solve, it is a mystery to be lived. The philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti once said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." Contentment is rebellion. At this point, your life begins to change, not because you've run faster, but because you've stopped running. And in that stillness, something emerges: clarity. Not the clarity of a 5-year plan or a productivity hack, but the clarity of knowing what matters. Clarity of being. You begin to see relationships differently, not as transactions or performances, but as mirrors. You begin to speak more honestly, to listen more fully, to stop trying to impress and simply connect. Relationships become intentional. You surround yourself with people who reflect your values, not your insecurities. You let go of competition and step into community. You build what author Charles Eisenstein calls the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, not through utopian fantasy, but through small, grounded, daily acts of alignment. Listening, sharing, creating, caring. That is what a post-rat race life looks like. Not spectacular, but real. And in time, something deeper arises, a sense of spiritual presence. Not necessarily religious, but awake. A quiet knowing that life is not just tasks and milestones, but moments and mysteries. The poet Mary Oliver once asked, "What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" The answer is not found in strategy. It is found in surrender, in noticing, in being, in loving without condition and living without armor. You will still have hard days. You will still face pressure. But you will face them from a different place. Not from fear, but from grounding. Not from reactivity, but from response. That is freedom. Not a perfect life, but a conscious one. That's what it means to truly escape the rat race, not just to leave a system, but to no longer carry it within you. So if you've made it here, if you've walked through all 3 stages of this journey, let this be your invitation, not to do more, but to live deeper. Not to fix yourself, but to remember yourself. You were never meant to be a cog. You were never meant to be measured. You were not born to compete, impress, or accumulate.